In my previous video, I looked at when Golf Whiskey Delta ran off the runway at Leeds Bradford. In this one, I'm going to take a look at an incident that happened a few days previous to that when Golf Whiskey Delta failed to pressurise on climb out from Manchester flying to Kos. Golf Whiskey Delta was due to fly to Kos in Greece at 6:15 that morning, but neither of the pilots involved were scheduled for the flight. Instead, they were due to come on standby duty at 3 in the morning. The commander was woken up at 1 o'clock telling him he'd been assigned the Kos flight, and his co-pilot was notified by phone at 2:30. Both pilots were told to report at 4:30. The commander got to the crew room on time, but the co-pilot was held up by a closure of a motorway. It was agreed that the co-pilot would meet the crew at the aircraft. As the aircraft took to the skies heading for Kos, 187 passengers on board had no idea that in just over 2 hours they'd be back on the ground at Manchester, because 2 switches had been overlooked. The Boeing 737 uses compressed air created by the engines for cabin pressurization. This is called bleed air. This is fed into 2 air conditioning packs before being fed into the cabin. Taking this air from the engines does reduce engine performance slightly. Work had been carried out on the conditioning packs through the night previous to the flight, and the engine bleed switches had been left in the off position. This wasn't picked up by the pilots. Commercial aircraft have been pressurised since way back in 1946. Aircraft are pressurised so that we can breathe comfortably. An aircraft flying between 30,000 and 40,000 feet uses less fuel, flies above the weather and avoids turbulence. But as we get higher, the air gets less dense, so contains less oxygen, so compressed air is pumped into the cabin and the pressure is regulated by an output valve. Think of the aeroplane cabin as a car tyre being pumped up and the outflow valve as a slow puncture. Fighter pilots also need oxygen, but because of the high G-forces involved, forced oxygen via a mask is used instead.
There's 200 knots.
Altitude.
300. There's 400 knots. And 420, here we go. Departure, good afternoon, Viper 01's passing 2,000 for 10,000.
Viper 01, shot departure loud and clear.
How you doing?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Hey, geez, aren't we on a roll?
Okay.
Viper 01, radar contact, altitude.
Viper 01 is leveling 10,000.
Viper 01, roger.
All right. Doing good?
Yeah.
Hypoxia is a state of oxygen deficiency in the body which can lead to dizziness, headache, difficulty thinking, unconsciousness and eventually death. Unfortunately, our body doesn't give us reliable signals at the onset of hypoxia. The brain is the first part of the body to reflect a diminished oxygen supply, and the evidence of this is usually a loss of judgment. As the aircraft passed 13,000 feet, a warning light and warning horn sounded. It was noticed that the engine bleeds were off and they were switched on and the plane was levelled at 15,000 feet. Thinking this had solved the problem, a further climb was requested. During this climb, a further warning indicated a problem with the right air conditioning pack. After talking to ground, it was agreed to return to Manchester. The passengers were told. Had the climb continued, passengers' oxygen masks would have dropped. Switches that should have been returned to on as part of the maintenance and also checked as part of the takeoff checks were missed. After flying in the hold with the undercarriage down for an hour, the aircraft was light enough to land and landed safely back at Manchester. This incident seems to be a mixture of maintenance work, traffic and tiredness. Both pilots that day had been working very hard recently. The commander's pre-duty rest was disturbed with less than 3 hours sleep being achieved. Chronic fatigue can creep up on a person without them even recognising it.